Jessica Martinez wiped the grease from her hands with a worn rag, her dark eyes scanning the massive A-60 Black Hawk helicopter before her. The aircraft maintenance hangar at Fort Carson buzzed with activity, but Jessica had learned to tune out the noise and focus on the machines that demanded her attention. At 28, she had been working as a civilian contractor for the military for 6 years, earning respect through her exceptional skills rather than her rank or connections. The helicopter's engine compartment was open, exposing the complex network of components that kept the aircraft airborne. Jessica's supervisor, Master Sergeant Robert Thompson, approached with his usual scowl. Thompson was a career military man who had never quite accepted that some of the best mechanics on base weren't soldiers but civilian contractors like Jessica. His prejudice ran deeper than professional rivalry. He seemed to take personal offense at her competence. "Martinez, you're taking too long on this bird," Thompson barked, his voice carrying across the hangar. "We need it ready for the training exercise tomorrow morning, not next week." Jessica looked up from her work, her expression remaining calm despite the unfair criticism. She had been working on the helicopter for only 3 hours, and the maintenance schedule clearly indicated she had 2 full days to complete the complex engine overhaul. "Sergeant Thompson, I'm actually ahead of schedule," Jessica replied professionally, gesturing to her clipboard. "The maintenance manual specifies 48 hours for this particular service, and I've already completed 60% of the work." Her colleagues nearby exchanged glances, recognizing the familiar tension between Jessica and their supervisor. Everyone knew Jessica was one of the most skilled mechanics on base, but Thompson seemed determined to undermine her at every opportunity. Thompson's face reddened with anger. "Don't lecture me about schedules, Martinez. I've been maintaining aircraft since before you could hold a wrench. Maybe if you spent less time showing off and more time actually working, we wouldn't have these delays." The accusation was particularly galling because Jessica rarely socialized during work hours, preferring to focus entirely on her tasks. Jessica felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "I understand your concern, Sergeant, but I need to follow proper procedures to ensure flight safety. Rushing this maintenance could compromise the aircraft's reliability." She had learned early in her career that safety protocols existed for good reasons, and she refused to cut corners regardless of pressure from supervisors. "Flight safety," Thompson laughed mockingly. "You think you know more about flight safety than a 20-year veteran. The problem with you civilians is that you don't understand military urgency. When I give you a deadline, you meet it, period." His words carried an implicit threat that Jessica couldn't ignore. As a civilian contractor, her job security depended on maintaining good relationships with military personnel, even unreasonable ones like Thompson. The other mechanics in the hangar had stopped their work to listen, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere of tension and anticipation. Jessica realized that this confrontation would likely define her relationship with Thompson going forward, and she needed to handle it carefully while standing firm on safety principles. The next morning, Jessica arrived at the hangar early, hopping to complete the helicopter maintenance before the scheduled training exercise. She had worked late the previous evening, ensuring every component was properly serviced and documented. The Black Hawk stood ready for final inspection, its engines gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Jessica took pride in her meticulous work, knowing that the lives of the crew depended on her attention to detail. Thompson entered the hangar with Colonel Patricia Williams, the base's commanding officer. Colonel Williams was known for her fairness and professionalism, qualities that had earned her respect throughout the military community. Jessica had interacted with the colonel only briefly during her tenure at Fort Carson, but she had always been impressed by Williams' commitment to excellence and safety. "Colonel Williams, I want to show you the kind of delays we're experiencing with our civilian contractors," Thompson announced loudly, his voice echoing through the hangar. "Martinez here took 2 full days to complete what should have been a simple maintenance check. This kind of inefficiency is compromising our training schedules and mission readiness." Jessica felt her stomach drop as she realized Thompson was using her as an example of supposed contractor incompetence. She had followed all procedures correctly and actually completed the work ahead of schedule, but Thompson was twisting the facts to support his narrative. The other mechanics watched nervously, understanding that their colleague was being unfairly targeted. Colonel Williams approached the helicopter and examined Jessica's work with a practiced eye. She reviewed the maintenance logs, checking timestamps and procedure compliance. "Sergeant Thompson, according to these records, the maintenance was completed within the standard time frame. The work appears to be thorough and properly documented." Thompson's expression hardened. "Colonel, with respect, civilian contractors don't understand military urgency. They operate on their own timeline, not ours. We need mechanics who can adapt to changing priorities and accelerated schedules when necessary." He was carefully avoiding direct lies while creating a misleading impression of Jessica's performance. Jessica stepped forward respectfully. "Colonel Williams, I'd like to clarify that I completed this maintenance check 12 hours ahead of the scheduled deadline. The engine overhaul required specific procedures that couldn't be safely accelerated without risking aircraft integrity." She spoke calmly but firmly, determined to defend her professional reputation. Colonel Williams nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate your commitment to safety protocols, Martinez. However, I need to understand if there are ways to improve our efficiency without compromising safety." She was clearly trying to balance Thompson's concerns with Jessica's valid points about proper procedures. Thompson seized the opportunity to escalate his attack. "Colonel, This is exactly what I'm talking about. Civilian contractors always hide behind safety regulations when they can't meet our operational demands. Military mechanics understand that sometimes you have to work faster and smarter to support mission requirements. The implications of Thompson's words were clear to everyone present. He was suggesting that Jessica's adherence to safety protocols was somehow unpatriotic or unsupportive of military operations. This characterization was both unfair and dangerous, as it pressured mechanics to potentially compromise safety for the sake of arbitrary deadlines. Jessica felt the weight of multiple gazes upon her, knowing that her response would significantly impact her future at Fort Carson and potentially her entire career in military contracting. Colonel Williams raised her hand to halt the conversation. "Sergeant Thompson, I want to be very clear about something. Safety protocols exist for a reason, and they are not optional guidelines. Every mechanic on this base, whether military or civilian, is expected to follow established procedures without compromise." Her tone carried the authority of someone who had seen the consequences of cutting corners in maintenance. Thompson's face showed his frustration, but he couldn't argue with his commanding officer's direct statement. "Of course, Colonel. I'm simply suggesting that we need contractors who can work efficiently within our safety framework." He was backpedaling while trying to maintain his position against Jessica. "Martinez, I'd like you to walk me through the maintenance you performed on this aircraft," Colonel Williams requested. Jessica nodded and began explaining each step of the process, from the initial inspection to the final system checks. Her knowledge was evident as she detailed the specific procedures, parts replaced, and potential issues identified during the service. As Jessica spoke, Colonel Williams asked technical questions that demonstrated her own understanding of aircraft maintenance. The colonel had clearly risen through the ranks with practical experience, not just administrative skills. "You mentioned replacing the hydraulic filter. What led you to make that decision?" she inquired. "During the routine inspection, I noticed the filter showed signs of contamination that exceeded acceptable limits," Jessica explained, retrieving the old filter from her workstation. "According to the maintenance manual, this level of contamination indicates potential system issues that could affect flight controls. Replacing it now prevents more serious problems later." Colonel Williams examined the filter, noting the visible contamination. "This was good catch, Martinez. How long have you been performing maintenance on military aircraft?" The question seemed designed to establish Jessica's credentials in front of Thompson and the other mechanics. "6 years, Colonel. I started working on civilian aircraft before transitioning to military contracts. I've maintained everything from small reconnaissance helicopters to large transport aircraft." Jessica's experience was extensive, covering a wide range of military aviation platforms. Thompson interjected impatiently. "Colonel, while Martinez may have experience, the issue remains that our training schedules are being impacted by lengthy maintenance procedures. We need to find ways to accelerate these processes without compromising safety, as you mentioned." Colonel Williams turned to Thompson with a measured expression. "Sergeant, what's the standard time frame for the maintenance procedure Martinez just completed?" She was clearly testing Thompson's knowledge of the actual regulations and procedures. Thompson hesitated, realizing he might not have the specific information at hand. "I'd need to check the exact specifications, Colonel, but I know it can be done faster than 2 days." His uncertainty was becoming apparent to everyone present. "The standard time frame is 48 hours for this particular engine overhaul," Colonel Williams stated. "Martinez completed it in 36 hours, which is actually ahead of schedule. I'm concerned that we're creating artificial pressure that could potentially compromise safety standards." The colonel's words hung in the air, creating an uncomfortable silence. Jessica felt a mixture of relief and vindication, while Thompson's expression showed his growing frustration with the direction of the conversation. Colonel Williams continued her inspection of the helicopter, asking detailed questions about various components and systems. Her thoroughness impressed Jessica, who realized that the colonel possessed genuine technical knowledge rather than just administrative oversight. "Martinez, show me the engine compression readings you recorded during the maintenance." Jessica retrieved her documentation and presented the comprehensive data she had collected. Every measurement was properly recorded, with notes explaining any readings that fell outside normal parameters. The compression readings were within acceptable limits across all cylinders, Colonel. I did notice cylinder 3 was running slightly low, so I performed additional checks to ensure it wasn't indicating a developing problem. "What additional checks did you perform?" Colonel Williams inquired, clearly testing Jessica's diagnostic skills and attention to detail. The question demonstrated that the colonel understood the importance of thorough maintenance procedures. "I performed a borescope inspection of the cylinder walls, checked valve clearances, and examined the spark plug condition. All tests indicated normal wear patterns with no signs of imminent failure. I documented everything and recommended monitoring the cylinder during the next scheduled maintenance." Jessica's methodical approach impressed everyone present. Thompson shifted uncomfortably as it became increasingly clear that Jessica had performed exemplary work. "Colonel, I'm not questioning Martinez's technical abilities, but we need to consider operational efficiency. Training schedules are tight, and any delays can impact readiness." Colonel Williams fixed Thompson with a stern look. "Sergeant, I need you to understand something clearly. Aircraft maintenance is not an area where we compromise for the sake of convenience. The lives of our aircrew depend on the thoroughness and accuracy of maintenance procedures. Any suggestion that we should rush these processes is unacceptable. The rebuke was delivered professionally but firmly, leaving no doubt about the colonel's priorities. Jessica felt grateful for the support, while Thompson's expression showed his growing frustration with the situation. The other mechanics watched silently, recognizing the significance of the exchange. "I understand, Colonel," Thompson replied stiffly. "However, I believe we need to ensure all personnel, including civilian contractors, understand the importance of meeting operational deadlines within safety parameters." He was trying to salvage some authority while accepting the colonel's directive. Colonel Williams nodded. "Absolutely. Which is why I'm pleased to see Martinez completing maintenance ahead of schedule while maintaining proper procedures. This is exactly the kind of performance we need from all our maintenance personnel." Her words provided clear validation of Jessica's work ethic and competence. Jessica spoke up respectfully. "Colonel, I want to assure you that I understand the importance of supporting operational requirements. I always strive to complete maintenance as efficiently as possible while ensuring safety standards are met. If there are ways to improve our processes, I'm always willing to discuss them." The offer demonstrated Jessica's professionalism and willingness to collaborate, even after being unfairly criticized. Colonel Williams appreciated the response, while Thompson remained silent, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I think we should schedule a maintenance review meeting to discuss our procedures and identify any opportunities for improvement," Colonel Williams suggested. "I want all maintenance personnel, military and civilian, to participate in this discussion." The maintenance review meeting was scheduled for the following week, giving everyone time to prepare their thoughts and suggestions. Jessica spent the intervening days documenting her maintenance procedures and researching potential improvements that could enhance efficiency without compromising safety. She was determined to contribute positively to the discussion, despite Thompson's earlier criticisms. On the day of the meeting, Jessica arrived early to find the conference room already occupied by several military mechanics and supervisors. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone aware of the conflict between Jessica and Thompson. Colonel Williams entered promptly at the scheduled time, followed by Thompson and several other senior personnel. "Thank you all for attending this meeting," Colonel Williams began. "Our purpose today is to review our maintenance procedures and identify ways to improve efficiency while maintaining our safety standards. I want to hear from everyone, regardless of rank or contractor status." Her inclusive approach set a positive tone for the discussion. Captain Michael Rodriguez, the lead military mechanic, spoke first. "Colonel, I think our current procedures are generally sound, but we might benefit from better coordination between different maintenance teams. Sometimes we have multiple people working on the same system without proper communication." Jessica nodded in agreement. "Captain Rodriguez makes a good point. I've noticed that clearer communication protocols could prevent redundant work and reduce overall maintenance time. Perhaps we could implement a more structured handoff system between shifts." Thompson frowned at Jessica's suggestion. "The issue isn't communication protocols. The problem is that some personnel take too long to complete routine procedures. We need to emphasize speed and efficiency, not create more bureaucratic processes." Colonel Williams intervened. "Sergeant Thompson, I want to focus on constructive solutions rather than criticism. Can you provide specific examples of procedures that you believe could be accelerated safely?" Her request put Thompson in the position of offering solutions rather than just complaints. Thompson hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the shift in focus. "Well, Colonel, I think maintenance personnel could work more efficiently if they understood the operational urgency of their tasks. Sometimes aircraft sit idle while mechanics follow lengthy procedures that might not be entirely necessary." The suggestion that established procedures might not be necessary drew sharp looks from several attendees. Jessica felt compelled to respond. "Sergeant Thompson, could you specify which procedures you consider unnecessarily lengthy? I'd be interested to understand your perspective on streamlining maintenance while maintaining safety standards." The direct question put Thompson in a difficult position. He couldn't identify specific procedures to eliminate without appearing to compromise safety, but he also couldn't back down from his previous criticism. "I'm talking about general efficiency, Martinez. Some mechanics work slower than others, and we need to address those disparities." Colonel Williams leaned forward. "Sergeant, I need specific examples to evaluate your concerns properly. General observations don't help us improve our processes." Her tone indicated growing impatience with Thompson's vague criticisms. Captain Rodriguez interjected diplomatically. "Colonel, I think we all want to support operational requirements while maintaining safety. Perhaps we could review our current timeframes and see if any adjustments are warranted based on actual performance data." The suggestion provided a face-saving way to address Thompson's concerns while maintaining focus on facts rather than opinions. Jessica appreciated the captain's diplomatic approach to the sensitive situation. Colonel Williams nodded approvingly at Captain Rodriguez's suggestion. "That's exactly the kind of constructive approach we need. I want to review our maintenance data from the past 6 months to identify trends and potential improvements. Captain Rodriguez, Can you compile that information for our next meeting? Absolutely, Colonel. I'll pull together completion times, safety incidents, and any delays that impacted operations. This data should give us a clear picture of our current performance. Captain Rodriguez's response demonstrated the kind of professional approach that Colonel Williams valued. Thompson realized he needed to contribute something constructive to the discussion. Colonel, I'd like to suggest that we establish clearer communication between maintenance and operations personnel. Sometimes we receive last-minute changes to flight schedules that affect our maintenance planning. The suggestion was actually reasonable, and Jessica found herself nodding in agreement. That's a good point, Sergeant Thompson. Better advance notice of schedule changes would help us plan maintenance more effectively. We could potentially reduce turnaround times with improved coordination. Colonel Williams made notes on her tablet. I'll speak with the operations officer about improving communication protocols. What other suggestions do you have for enhancing our efficiency? Her question was directed to the group as a whole, encouraging broad participation. Sergeant Lisa Chen, one of the military mechanics, spoke up. Colonel, I think we could benefit from cross-training between different aircraft types. Sometimes we have personnel standing idle while others are overloaded with work on specific platforms. Jessica had observed the same issue. I agree with Sergeant Chen. I've worked on multiple aircraft types, and the skills often transfer between platforms. Cross-training could provide more flexibility in work assignments and reduce bottlenecks. Thompson grudgingly acknowledged the validity of the suggestion. Cross-training has merit, but we need to ensure personnel maintain proficiency on their primary aircraft assignments. We can't have generalists who aren't expert on any specific platform. Colonel Williams considered the various suggestions. These are all valid points. I want to implement a pilot program for cross-training while maintaining primary specializations. Captain Rodriguez, can you develop a training plan that addresses these concerns? Yes, Colonel. I'll work with our training department to create a structured approach that maintains expertise while providing flexibility. Captain Rodriguez was clearly comfortable with the expanded responsibilities. Jessica felt encouraged by the constructive direction of the meeting. Despite Thompson's initial hostility, the group was identifying genuine improvements that could benefit everyone. She decided to offer another suggestion. Colonel, I'd like to propose that we establish peer review processes for complex maintenance procedures. Having another mechanic verify critical work could improve both safety and efficiency. The suggestion drew interested looks from several attendees. Thompson, however, seemed skeptical. Peer review sounds like another bureaucratic layer that will slow down our processes. We need to trust our mechanics to do their jobs properly." Colonel Williams raised an eyebrow. "Sergeant Thompson, peer review is a standard practice in aviation maintenance precisely because it improves safety and catches potential errors before they become problems. This isn't about distrust. It's about building redundancy into our quality control processes." Jessica was pleased to see the Colonel's support for the idea. "I envision a simple process where another qualified mechanic reviews critical work and signs off on the documentation. It would add minimal time while providing additional assurance." The meeting continued for another hour, with various personnel offering suggestions and discussing implementation details. Jessica found herself contributing regularly to the discussion, her expertise and professionalism evident to everyone present. Thompson's initial criticism of her work seemed increasingly unfounded, as she demonstrated comprehensive knowledge and collaborative spirit. Captain Rodriguez took detailed notes on all suggestions, organizing them into categories for further evaluation. "Colonel, I think we have enough material to develop a comprehensive improvement plan. Should we schedule a follow-up meeting to review the proposed changes?" Colonel Williams agreed. "Yes, let's meet again in 2 weeks to review the data analysis and discuss implementation timelines. I want everyone to think about these suggestions and come prepared with additional ideas or concerns." As the meeting concluded, Jessica felt cautiously optimistic about the outcomes. The constructive discussion had demonstrated that most personnel were committed to improving processes while maintaining safety standards. Thompson's obstructionist attitude had been largely neutralized by the collaborative approach. Thompson approached Jessica as they left the conference room. "Martinez, I want to be clear that my concerns about efficiency aren't personal. I'm just trying to ensure we meet our operational commitments." His tone was less hostile than before, suggesting he recognized the need to improve their working relationship. Jessica responded professionally. "I understand, Sergeant Thompson. We all want to support mission requirements effectively. I'm committed to finding ways to improve our processes while maintaining safety standards." She was willing to work collaboratively despite his earlier unfair criticism. "Good. I hope you'll consider ways to accelerate your maintenance procedures without compromising quality. Every hour of aircraft downtime affects our training capacity." Thompson's response indicated he was still focused on speed, but at least he was no longer directly attacking her competence. Colonel Williams overheard the exchange and approached them. "I appreciate seeing this collaborative spirit. Both of you bring valuable perspectives to our maintenance operations, and I expect you to work together effectively." Her words carried the weight of command expectation. Jessica nodded respectfully. "Absolutely, Colonel. I'm committed to continuous improvement and supporting our team's success. Her response demonstrated the professionalism that had impressed Colonel Williams throughout the meeting. Thompson also acknowledged the directive. Of course, Colonel, we'll work together to implement the improvements we discussed today. His compliance was evident, though his enthusiasm seemed somewhat forced. As they parted ways, Jessica reflected on the day's events. The meeting had provided an opportunity to demonstrate her expertise and professionalism, potentially improving her standing with base leadership. However, she remained cautious about Thompson's true intentions and commitment to collaborative improvement. The next 2 weeks would be crucial for implementing the discussed changes and establishing new working relationships. Jessica was determined to contribute positively to the process, while remaining vigilant about potential obstacles or conflicts. During the following weeks, Jessica threw herself into the improvement initiatives with characteristic dedication. She worked with Captain Rodriguez to develop standardized checklists for different maintenance procedures, incorporating the peer review processes she had suggested. The work was time-consuming but rewarding, as it provided opportunities to interact with other mechanics and supervisors in a collaborative environment. Thompson maintained a grudging civility toward Jessica, but she could sense his continued resentment beneath the surface. He participated in the improvement meetings, but often seemed to be looking for opportunities to undermine the new processes or criticize their implementation. Jessica remained professional but cautious in her interactions with him. The peer review system was implemented gradually, starting with the most critical maintenance procedures. Jessica found herself frequently selected as a reviewer due to her expertise and attention to detail. The additional responsibility was welcome, as it provided opportunities to mentor less experienced mechanics and share knowledge across the team. One afternoon, while reviewing a complex engine maintenance procedure performed by a young military mechanic named Private Johnson, Jessica discovered a potential problem. The work appeared to be technically correct, but she noticed that one of the engine sensors had readings that were within acceptable limits, but trending toward the problematic range. "Private Johnson, can you walk me through your sensor readings?" Jessica asked, pointing to the specific measurements in question. The young mechanic reviewed his documentation and confirmed the readings were within specifications. "You're right that the readings are acceptable," Jessica acknowledged, "but I'm concerned about the trend. These sensors typically show gradual degradation, and this reading suggests we might want to replace it proactively rather than waiting for it to fail." Private Johnson examined the sensor more closely. "I see what you mean. The reading is legal, but it's definitely on the higher end of the acceptable range. Should we replace it now or document it for monitoring during the next maintenance cycle?" Jessica considered the options. Let's replace it now. The cost of a sensor is minimal compared to the potential consequences of an in-flight failure. This is exactly the kind of preventive maintenance that improves overall reliability. The decision demonstrated the value of the peer review system, as it caught a potential problem that might have been overlooked by a less experienced mechanic working alone. Private Johnson appreciated the guidance and learning opportunity. Thompson observed the interaction from across the hangar, his expression showing disapproval rather than appreciation for the collaborative problem-solving. He approached Jessica and Private Johnson with his characteristic scowl. "Martinez, you're turning a simple maintenance check into a major overhaul. That sensor reading is within specifications, and there's no requirement to replace it. We can't afford to replace every component that shows minor wear." Jessica maintained her professional demeanor despite Thompson's criticism. "Sergeant Thompson, the sensor replacement is a proactive measure that prevents potential in-flight failures. The cost is minimal, and it improves aircraft reliability." Thompson's frustration was evident. The cost isn't minimal when you multiply it across our entire fleet. We need to follow established procedures, not create new requirements based on personal preferences. Private Johnson looked uncomfortable as he found himself in the middle of a disagreement between Jessica and Thompson. The young mechanic clearly respected Jessica's expertise, but couldn't openly disagree with his military supervisor. Jessica recognized the difficult position and decided to handle the situation diplomatically. "Sergeant Thompson, I understand your concern about costs and procedures. Perhaps we should document this situation and discuss it with Captain Rodriguez to establish a clear policy for similar cases." Her suggestion provided a way to resolve the immediate conflict while addressing the broader issue. Thompson seemed frustrated by Jessica's reasonable approach, as it made him appear obstructionist if he continued to argue. "Fine, we'll document it. But I want to be clear that following established procedures is our priority, not creating additional work based on subjective interpretations." Jessica nodded professionally. "Absolutely, Sergeant. I believe proactive maintenance serves our mission better than reactive repairs, but I agree we need clear guidelines for these decisions." Her response demonstrated commitment to both safety and proper procedures. Private Johnson began documenting the sensor situation, including Jessica's observations and Thompson's concerns. The documentation would provide a clear record of the decision-making process and help establish policies for similar situations in the future. Later that day, Jessica approached Captain Rodriguez to discuss the sensor replacement issue. She explained the situation objectively, focusing on the technical aspects rather than the interpersonal conflict with Thompson. Captain, I think we need clearer guidelines for proactive component replacement when readings are within specifications but showing concerning trends. Captain Rodriguez listened carefully to Jessica's explanation. You're right that we need better guidance on these situations. Proactive maintenance can prevent failures, but we also need to consider cost implications and parts availability. Let me research what other bases are doing and develop a policy recommendation. The captain's response was exactly what Jessica had hoped for, a thoughtful approach that considered both technical and practical factors. I'd be happy to help research best practices from other facilities or manufacturers' recommendations, she offered. That would be valuable, Jessica. Your experience with multiple aircraft types gives you a broader perspective than many of our personnel. Can you put together a summary of proactive maintenance practices you've seen implemented effectively? Jessica appreciated the opportunity to contribute to policy development. Absolutely, Captain. I'll focus on practices that have demonstrated clear benefits in terms of safety and operational efficiency. The assignment provided a constructive outlet for her expertise and enthusiasm. As Jessica worked on the research project, she found herself energized by the opportunity to contribute to systemic improvements. The work required her to analyze data, consult technical manuals, and communicate with maintenance personnel at other facilities. It was exactly the kind of challenging, meaningful work that had drawn her to aviation maintenance. Thompson observed Jessica's expanded role with evident displeasure. Her growing influence and recognition seemed to threaten his authority and position within the maintenance organization. He began looking for opportunities to undermine her work or discredit her contributions. Jessica's research on proactive maintenance practices yielded impressive results. She compiled data from multiple military bases and civilian aviation facilities, demonstrating that strategic component replacement could reduce unscheduled maintenance by up to 30% while improving overall aircraft availability. The findings supported her approach to the sensor replacement issue. Captain Rodriguez reviewed Jessica's report with obvious interest. This is excellent work, Jessica. The data clearly shows the benefits of proactive maintenance when implemented systematically. I want to present this to Colonel Williams and recommend we pilot some of these practices. The captain's enthusiasm was gratifying, but Jessica remained cautious about Thompson's likely reaction. I appreciate your support, Captain. I hope we can implement these practices in a way that builds consensus among all maintenance personnel. I understand your concern about buy-in from the team. Change management is always challenging, but the data supports these improvements. I'll work with Sergeant Thompson to ensure he understands the benefits and can support implementation. Jessica hoped the captain's diplomatic approach would help overcome Thompson's resistance, but she suspected that Thompson's opposition was based more on personal animosity than genuine concern about procedures. The next day, Captain Rodriguez called a meeting to discuss Jessica's research findings and potential implementation strategies. The attendees included all maintenance supervisors and senior mechanics, creating an opportunity for comprehensive discussion of the proposed changes. Jessica has compiled some impressive data on proactive maintenance practices, Captain Rodriguez began. I want everyone to review these findings and discuss how we might implement similar approaches in our facility. Jessica presented her research professionally, focusing on the data and avoiding any references to her earlier disagreement with Thompson. She explained how other facilities had successfully implemented proactive maintenance programs and the measurable benefits they had achieved. Thompson listened to the presentation with obvious skepticism. This all sounds expensive and complicated. We're already following established maintenance procedures, and I don't see why we need to create additional requirements based on practices at other facilities. Several other attendees exchanged glances, recognizing Thompson's reflexive opposition to Jessica's ideas. Captain Rodriguez addressed the concern diplomatically. Sergeant Thompson, what specific aspects of the proposed practices concern you most? Perhaps we can address those issues during implementation planning. Thompson seemed uncomfortable with the request for specific feedback rather than general criticism. I'm concerned about the cost implications and the additional workload for our mechanics. We're already stretched thin, and adding more requirements could impact our ability to meet operational deadlines. Jessica had anticipated this objection and prepared a response. Sergeant Thompson, the data actually shows that proactive maintenance reduces overall workload by preventing more time-consuming, unscheduled repairs. The initial investment in additional components is offset by improved aircraft availability and reduced emergency maintenance. The factual response, supported by data, made it difficult for Thompson to maintain his opposition without appearing unreasonable. He shifted his argument to question the applicability of the data to their specific situation. Those other facilities might have different aircraft types, operational tempos, or maintenance schedules. We can't assume that practices that work elsewhere will be effective here. Captain Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully at Thompson's concern. That's a valid point, Sergeant. Jessica, how do we address the question of applicability to our specific situation? The captain was clearly testing Jessica's ability to handle objections while maintaining professional dialogue. Jessica was prepared for this challenge. You're right that we need to consider our specific circumstances, Sergeant Thompson. That's why I recommend starting with a pilot program focused on a few high-impact components. We can measure the results and adjust our approach based on actual performance data. The suggestion for a pilot program was strategically sound, as it addressed Thompson's concerns while providing a path forward. Several other attendees nodded approvingly, recognizing the wisdom of testing new approaches before full implementation. Sergeant Chen spoke up in support. A pilot program makes sense. We could focus on components that have caused unscheduled maintenance in the past and measure whether proactive replacement reduces those incidents. Jessica appreciated the support from her colleague. Exactly, Sergeant Chen. We could start with 3 or 4 component types and track the results over 6 months. If the data shows clear benefits, we can expand the program gradually. Thompson found himself increasingly isolated as other attendees warmed to the idea. His objections were beginning to sound obstructionist rather than constructive. I still think we're creating unnecessary complexity. Our current procedures work, and we shouldn't fix what isn't broken. Captain Rodriguez intervened diplomatically. Sergeant Thompson, I appreciate your concern about maintaining proven procedures. However, continuous improvement is essential for maintaining our competitive edge. We can implement changes carefully while preserving what works well. The captain's response reinforced the importance of adaptation and improvement, making Thompson's resistance appear outdated. Jessica sensed that the momentum was shifting in favor of the pilot program. Captain Rodriguez, I'd be happy to work with the team to design a pilot program that addresses everyone's concerns, Jessica offered. We can establish clear metrics and review processes to ensure we're making data-driven decisions. The offer demonstrated Jessica's collaborative approach and commitment to inclusive implementation. Even Thompson would find it difficult to object to a carefully designed pilot program with proper oversight. Colonel Williams entered the meeting room unexpectedly, having heard about the discussion from her staff. I apologize for interrupting, but I understand you're discussing proactive maintenance practices. I'm very interested in this topic. The colonel's presence immediately elevated the importance of the discussion. Jessica felt a mixture of opportunity and nervousness, as she realized the colonel would evaluate both her proposal and the team's response to it. Colonel, Jessica has prepared an excellent analysis of proactive maintenance practices used at other facilities, Captain Rodriguez explained. We're discussing a pilot program to test these approaches in our environment. Colonel Williams turned to Jessica with interest. I'd like to hear your recommendations, Martinez. What specific improvements do you think we could implement most effectively? The direct question from the commanding officer represented a significant opportunity for Jessica to demonstrate her expertise and value to the organization. She needed to present her ideas clearly and persuasively while remaining respectful of Thompson's position. Jessica stood and addressed Colonel Williams directly, her confidence evident despite the high-stakes situation. "Colonel, my research indicates that strategic proactive maintenance can significantly improve aircraft availability while reducing long-term costs. I recommend starting with a pilot program focused on components that have historically caused unscheduled maintenance." Colonel Williams listened attentively as Jessica explained her findings and recommendations. The data was compelling, showing consistent benefits across multiple types of aircraft and operational environments. Jessica's presentation was professional and well-organized, demonstrating thorough research and clear thinking. "What kind of investment would this pilot program require?" Colonel Williams asked, focusing on the practical aspects of implementation. The question showed she was seriously considering the proposal rather than just being polite. Jessica had prepared detailed cost projections. "Colonel, the initial investment would be approximately $15,000 for additional components inventory. However, our analysis suggests this investment would be recovered within 6 months through reduced unscheduled maintenance and improved aircraft availability." The financial analysis was convincing, particularly given the significant costs associated with aircraft downtime and emergency repairs. Colonel Williams nodded approvingly at the thorough preparation evident in Jessica's response. Thompson felt compelled to voice his objections directly to the colonel. "Colonel Williams, I'm concerned about the complexity this adds to our operations. We have proven procedures that work effectively, and I question whether these changes are necessary." Colonel Williams turned to Thompson with a measured expression. "Sergeant Thompson, what specific aspects of the current procedures do you believe would be compromised by this pilot program?" Her question required Thompson to provide concrete objections rather than general resistance. Thompson struggled to articulate specific concerns that didn't sound obstructionist. "I'm worried about the additional workload for our mechanics and the potential for confusion when we have different procedures for different components." Jessica saw an opportunity to address Thompson's concerns constructively. "Sergeant Thompson, those are valid concerns that we can address through careful implementation. We could start with just 1 or 2 component types and provide clear training to ensure everyone understands the new procedures." Colonel Williams appreciated Jessica's diplomatic response to Thompson's objections. "I think a carefully designed pilot program makes sense. Captain Rodriguez, I want you to work with Martinez to develop a detailed implementation plan. Include metrics for measuring success and procedures for addressing any problems that arise." The colonel's directive provided clear support for Jessica's proposal, while ensuring proper oversight and management. Thompson's opposition had been effectively neutralized by the commanding officer's decision. I'd also like regular progress reports on the pilot program, Colonel Williams continued. If the results are positive, we'll consider expanding the program to additional component types and possibly sharing our findings with other facilities. Jessica felt a surge of satisfaction at the colonel's support, but she remained focused on the work ahead. Successful implementation would require careful planning, effective communication, and collaboration with all team members, including Thompson. Colonel, I'll work closely with Captain Rodriguez and the entire maintenance team to ensure successful implementation, Jessica assured her. We'll establish clear communication channels and feedback mechanisms to address any concerns that arise. Following Colonel Williams' directive, Jessica found herself in the unusual position of leading a significant organizational change initiative. The pilot program would test her technical expertise, project management skills, and ability to work with potentially resistant colleagues. She was determined to succeed while maintaining positive relationships with all team members. Captain Rodriguez scheduled a series of planning meetings to